again, I remind you of two things. Okay? So yesterday, I'll remind you of three things. Yesterday, you got worksheets 2 and 3, or week 2 and week 3 worksheets. So you have all of the chapter 1 worksheets in your possession. Okay. Tomorrow, the week 1, is that the cream colored one? The cream colored one, week 1 is due tomorrow in class. Probably have it done. If you wanted to turn it in early, some people have already started turning that in just to get it out of their possession. Tomorrow, you will also have a summative quiz. I want to say it is a front and a back, but it's not like there's. I personally don't like having, for lack of a better term, I'm going to throw the geometry team under the bus. I don't like having a geometry quiz where they try and cram 10 pounds worth of questions into a 4-pound bag. Like they're quick testing quizzes. You have no room to work. It's all the whole page is like full of stuff. I am not like that. I give you plenty of space to work because I like to see that quiz from front and back. I think it's maybe 10 questions. You will not need the full hour. But we're going to give you the only thing that we have planned tomorrow. And this goes for starting now going forward because now we actually have Fridays. Fridays are our assessment. Easy over there, Siri. Fridays are our assessment. Meaning every Friday from now until the end of the semester, the end of the year, I should say, you will have some kind of assessment. Formative quiz. Formative you can fix, summative quiz, summative test you can't fix. Tomorrow is a summative you can't fix. One shot. And then if we would have had another plane, we would have had 2 Fridays in this evening, then we would have okay. So with that being said, let's continue on down the line of chapter 1 or unit 1, whichever one you want to call it. Okay? Absolute value equations today. So, in the true mathematical sense of what's going on, the true mathematical definition of an absolute value is the absolute value is the distance a number is from 0 on the number. So the distance any number is from 0 on the number. Now, the distance word there is kind of important because you can never go a negative distance. So therefore, when we are taking the absolute value of something, it will always, bless you, it will always be positive. And probably when you first learned about absolute value back in, I guess, middle school, I think that's a 6th or a 7th grade topic. When you learned about that, your teacher probably just said, you just make it positive. You make anything, whatever's numbers inside the absolute value has to be or becomes positive. Okay? And that's fine, and that's great. But that the real reason behind that is because it is a distance. We can't have negative distances. So that is the real reason. Okay? Now, when you see different absolute value problems, what your brain is actually doing, so for instance, when we see the absolute value of 15, in the old school way, you just said, well, that's got to be 15. Absolute value of negative 8's got to be 8. Okay? Well, what your brain is really thinking subconsciously, you probably don't even know that, is you're asking yourself the question, self, how far away from 0 is 15? And the answer is 15. It is 15 units away from 0. Number. How far away is negative 8 from 0? Well, it's 8 units away. It just happens to be 8 units away in the negative direction. That's why it becomes 8. Now, if there is a negative sign in front of the absolute value, you would still do, so you would have the negative sign out in front, and then this part here would become positive 8, because absolute value of negative 8 is 8. And so then your final answer here will be negative. The only way that an absolute value can be negative is if you have a negative sign in front of it. Okay? Which can happen. Will happen. Probably will happen. It happens after week 2. Okay? But what we're really going to get into here now is we're going to get into solving absolute value equations. Okay? Now, I am a big step kind of a guy. Okay? Like, I like to have a process. I'm kind of OCD in that. I do this first, then I do this, then I do this. When my alarm goes off in the morning, the first thing I do is I set a 15-minute timer. So I do 15 more minutes of sleep. Okay? Then when that timer goes off, then I open up my phone and I open up one of my games that I got to check in on every day to like get coins and stuff like that. I do that. Then I go into not Words with Friends. What's it called? It's called Wordscapes. Then I go into Wordscapes and I play the daily Wordscapes puzzle. And then I'm like, okay, now my brain's turned on. Now I can get up and I can start. Okay? That's my morning routine. Okay? Every morning, that's what I do. Okay? So I like to have those steps. Okay? So the very first step that you would do, why is this cart like so close to me? The very first step that you would do is you would isolate the absolute value. What I mean by that is we want to hit only the absolute value on one side of our equation. Okay? So if we had a negative sign in front of that, or if we had some other terms before it or after it, we're going to move that stuff like we would do when we were solving equations and inequalities the last few days. Okay? So we want to get that all by itself. Okay? Now, 9 times out of 10 in absolute value equations, that's already going to be done. But I wanted to let you know that that's really what you got to do first, that absolute value by itself. Then, what you're going to do is you are going to make 2 equations. And this step right here is where you're going to make the most mistakes. because you're going to forget that you got to make that second equation. Okay? Because the absolute value of, I'll use negative 8 again. The absolute value of negative 8 is 8, but the absolute value of positive 8 is also 8. So there's two spots on the number line that both have a distance of 8 to 0. Okay? So in order to make that be, we have to solve that first. Okay? So the first equation that you are going to make is going to be, I call it the oops, I didn't spell it right though. I call it the just start over. Come on, better than that. The insides. So what's inside your absolute value, you set that equal to the other side. Okay? So basically on this one, you are just writing your equation again without an absolute value. Okay? That's all you're doing. So the first down here, both of these are isolated. So my first step here would be, I would say x equals 4. I would write it without the absolute value. Over here, I would say 2x minus 4 equals 8. I would write it without the absolute value, as is. Okay? Then your second equation is going to be the insides again, but this time it is going to equal the opposite of the other side. So my second equation over here would be x equals negative 4. My second equation over here would be 2x minus 4 equals negative 8. Okay? So those become the two equations that you have to then solve. So then you would solve those two equations. That gives you two answers. Okay? Now, this next step is probably the most skipped step of them all. Anybody know what the last step is going to be? Not circle or answer. No, I'm okay with that. Check. You want to check your work, especially in absolute value problems, because of what we're going to talk about here in about 5 minutes. Okay? All right? So we definitely need to check them both. Okay? Because one or both of them might go away. Might not work out. You might get no solution. Okay? That's a possibility. All right? So, let's get into these. Absolute value of x equals 4. First step, isolate the absolute value. Done. Second step, make two equations. Done. Third step, solve them. Done. So my answers here would be 4 and negative 4. If you wanted, I would accept plus or minus 4 on that. Okay with all of that. Okay. On this one, on letter B, absolute value of 2x minus 4 equals 8. We made our two equations. 2x minus 4 equals 8. 2x minus 4 equals negative 8. Made them both. Love it. Okay? Now we've got to solve them. So on this first step, this first equation, I'm going to add 4. That's going to give me 2x equals 12. Then I'm going to divide by 2. That's going to give me x equals 6. Now I could check this one right away if I wanted to, or I could wait and I could check them both back to back. But either way, if I check this down, 6 times 2 is 12. 12 minus 4 is 8. Absolute value of 8 is 8. 8 is equal to 4. Okay. Then I have to not forget to go check out my other one. I'm going to add 4 to both sides again. Then this becomes 2x equals negative 4. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 2. That's going to give me x equals negative 2. Then I also need to check negative 2. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 minus 4 is negative 8. The absolute value of negative 8 is 8, and 8 is equal to 8. So my answer here, now just a preferred type thing. I forgot to mention the preferred type over on the other side, is when you got multiple ones, I forgot to mention this in the first one, kind of, I mean, if you don't, it's fine, but if you can, put them in, numerical order, small. Just makes it easier on this rock. Okay? Okay? Love it. You tried those two at this time. No. Isolated the absolute value, done. Need to make 2 equations. 2x plus 3 equals 11 is my first equation. 2x plus 3 equals negative 11 is my second equation. Solving the first one, let's subtract 3. Then that's going to give me 2x equals 8. Dividing both sides by 2 gives me x equals 4. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 3 is 11. Absolute value of 11 is 11. 11 is equal to 11. Good. Second equation, let's subtract 3. That's going to give me 2x equals negative 14. Let's divide then by 2. That's going to give me x equals negative 7. Negative 7 times 2 is negative 14, plus 3 is negative 11. Absolute value of negative 11 is 11. 11 is equal to 11. Our answers here then would be negative 7 and 4. This stuff? I have to look. I'll look into it. Okay. First equation is going to be h minus 2 equals negative 4. Second equation is going to be h minus 2 equals positive 4. If I add 2 to both sides, then I get h equals negative 2. Negative 2 minus 2 is negative 4. Absolute value of negative 4 is positive 4. Is positive 4 equal to negative 4? It is? You tell me. But we're out of that. We already did the absolute value. Then no. Yeah. Then no, it's not. So this one gets thrown out. That one's not a solution. Okay? Now let's go to this one. I'm going to add 2. I'm going to add 2. That gives me h is equal to 6. 6 minus 2 is 4. Absolute value of 4 is 4. Is 4 equal to negative 4? No. That one also gets thrown out, leaving me with none solutions left. So that would be We could have also done it right from the start, and I'm guessing that's what you're going to say. Because the absolute value has to be positive because of the distance, we could have seen that we have an absolute value equals a negative number automatically. What that does, though, demonstrates for us is something called an extraneous solution. An extraneous solution is, where did it go? An extraneous solution, there it is, I gotta make sure again, is an answer that doesn't work. And it doesn't work because it fails the check. So it gets thrown out. You went through, you solved it all, and you're going to have that this year. You're going to have a lot of extraneous solutions where you go through and you solve something and it just doesn't work out. Okay? It fails the check. Sometimes, like in the last case, both of them were extraneous, so then it's a no solution. Sometimes you might get two possible answers, and when you check them, only one of them works out. Okay? And then that just becomes. So you get a couple of different ways. Sometimes you get non-extraneous solutions. Okay? It just happens. Okay? So what I would like you to do now is I would like you to try this example. It is our last example of the day, I do believe. Oops, hit the brakes. I don't want to do that on that right there. Yep, it's right across the hallway. Go out the door, take a right, second door on the left. Don't go in the first door on the left. That's the women's bathroom. You're so far away. Isolated absolute value, yes. First equation, 2x plus 5 equals 3x. Second equation, 2x plus 5 equals negative 3x. Solve the first one. I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. That's going to give me 5 is equal to x. 2 times 5 is 10. 10 plus 5 is 15. Absolute value of 15 is 15. Right side, 3 times 5 is 15. 15 is equal to 15, so that one checks out. I think we'll check that underneath it because it checks out. It works. Told me that I did it. Next one, I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides again. That's going to give me 5 is equal to negative 5x. Then I'm going to divide both sides by negative 5. And that's going to give me negative 1 is equal to x. Okay? 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Negative 2 plus 5 is 3. Absolute value of 3 is 3. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. Is 3 equal to negative 3? No. So that one gets tossed out. It is extraneous. And so my only answer then is 5. Because 5 worked out. Different from the last example, where both of them got this one only 1. Again, I remind you that tomorrow, week 1 worksheet is due. If you haven't done, you can already turn it in. That's fine. Do that. And you have a quiz tomorrow. I lied earlier. I apologize. I said it was 10 questions. 9 questions. And question number 10 is an extra credit. So there are 10